Welcome everybody to our second session today for Star Wars Day / Spring into Wellbeing Week. We're glad you could join us from all over the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, and the country. I'm Charity Counts. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of Midwest Museums. I'm still in my Jedi gear from this morning's session. And I'm super excited to have some wonderful museum leaders and professionals on our call today to share with you some Yoda-vational ideas that they have. With that, I really just want to turn the sharing of screens over to Michelle Moon and Bob to go ahead and introduce all of the panelists today and start our session. Bob Beatty from Lyndhurst Group is actually going to be our moderator for this conversation, and I'll be managing the chat and Q&A.
Hey, y'all, Charity, thank you so much. And for everybody else's benefit, this is actually how Charity dresses on a normal day because she is such a Jedi there. You're going to see a little bit in the backdrop there. I had to move command center from the basement office up to the upstairs, so there we go. So thank you guys very much for joining us. Michelle, can you cue up the slides? Will I get a chance to see the slides and still talk? This is museum people resilience. I have no internet service at my house, so we're doing this much remotely. So we're going to try to make this work and make your time. So I want to speak, on behalf of the crew here. Michelle Moon, myself, Richard Josey, and Trina Nelson Thomas. Just thank Charity for joining us or for letting us be here. And we'll be quick and hopefully efficient. Michelle, can you flip to the next slide, because I have a tiny objection to today being only called. Well, oh, not yet. This is a fantastic. No, Michelle, you can do that. The other one. There we go. This is a little reminder as to what we're doing here. Modeled after those old WPA posters about visiting national parks. And what we're doing today. I will admit I'm not a Star Wars, I'm not a Jedi actually, but I do know the original 3 trilogy about as well as anybody does, having been a child in the 80s and 70s and 80s. But here's my objection to Star Wars Day, and it relates to the introduction that we had there. If you could switch, Michelle. So today actually has long been known as Dave Brubeck Day. And the song we were just listening to, some of y'all picked up on that, is Take 5 by Dave Brubeck. It's actually his version of the song. Take 5 actually stands for the fact that there are 5 beats on the 5 quarter notes. So it's got an extra beat in the measure. So 5/4, in addition to being Star Wars Day, May the 4th be with you, is also considered Dave Brubeck Day in my household and in the households of a lot of us music geeks as we go through. Okay, there goes my hilarity for the first little bit. So we're going to start with Richard Josey, a good friend of mine, good friend of ours. Richard has been helping some of us have been meeting together in the self-care journey in the midst of the pandemic. And he has embraced actually what we did first thing this morning in these sessions. So Richard, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about how meditation has helped you in this moment.
Cool. Thanks you. Can you all hear me well? Okay, great. So yeah, Michelle, let's go to the next slide because I think it's pretty informative of where we are right now. Ponder the future, forget not the present. So as a consultant, my story is pretty interesting in terms of, a few months ago, there was a big question as to, whether the client that I had, whether they were going to be canceling my contract. And in the conversation, when he called, he said, Richard, I don't know, we may have to cancel your contract like next week. Now, you can understand my panic. I have a lady who I'm trying to make my wife sometime soon, kids, and to find that, my source of income that was, helping put food on the table, helping pay, the rent and so on and so forth, that, that was in jeopardy. Along with just sort of the crisis that was associated at the time. And initially it didn't impact me much except for, concerns of the job. But then I started losing friends. former colleagues and the like, and it really began to hit for me really, really hard. Michelle, let's go to the next slide. And so, I started to engage in, meditation and doing a bit of meditation, and I'd meditated before. Um, and it proved to be very valuable for me. And I ended up meditating at least twice a day. Sometimes Mondays can be more funky than Fridays. So Mondays, sometimes I get 3, maybe 4 meditations in. But in any case, the one thing that I've realized, and this is very recently, is you know I'm the one that's always thinking about the future. I'm always, what kind of ancestor will you be? What kind of future you want to create? Like these are my talking points. These are my thoughts. This is, how I try to inspire the world. And the full duration of this time frame, I've spent so much time focused on trying to change the world that I didn't pay attention to myself. Um, and so that's what makes this quote, so interesting to me. That a Jedi can have, must have the deepest commitment, the most serious mind. This one, a long time I watched all his life, has he looked away to the future, to the horizon. Never his mind on where he was. What was he doing? And this is a question that I actually just recently started asking myself last week, after a webinar that I did last week, actually. And so there is about it. So my lesson coming out of this is really about balance. It is about, definitely looking towards the future. Um, I refute notions of, oh, I can't wait until we get back to normal. I don't want to go back to normal because normal for everybody wasn't good. So I don't want to go back to where we were. I'm interested in trying to figure out how do we get to that place where equity and diversity is celebrated, but each one of us can just be us. We can smile when we want to smile. We can cry when we want to cry. Um, and yeah, at the end of the day, it is about trying to be our best selves. Meditation is helping, get there in terms of clearing my mind and thinking towards the future. But the other thing that I'm reminded of, and hopefully this will be helpful for one of you all, is that you can look to the future, but don't forget where you are now, because the lessons that you learn now are going to be really informative. Um, I can say that, from experience. So hope that's helpful, and looking forward to the questions and answers that may come up at the end.
Richard, we have another minute or so here real quick. Tell us about meditation, sort of how it works. What do you do and where did you get started on that?
Sure. So, really quickly, I got started in it because I was having a really difficult time in Minnesota where, I didn't really know anybody there. It was me, it was my 4-year-old. We were trying to figure out how to exist in this foreign land, in this foreign territory. And I actually went to a meditation class, and it's really about being recognizing your present state of mind. We get so angry, we get so frustrated, our emotions, kind of move us to to do things that may not be logical to us. And so meditation was perfect for me to just be mindful of the present thoughts that I have, and then to clear my mind so that I can make the best decisions despite the present thoughts that I had. Um, and again, I've been doing it ever since then, regularly. I'm a regular meditator, and especially when my spirits get down. Um, the last thing I'll say is that the interesting thing about stress is that stress can cause people to revert back to habits that may be habits that you're trying to get rid of. And so meditation kind of helps put you in that present mind state to be mindful about what your past has been, and maybe even guide you even further to what kind of future you're trying to create, but not overlooking the present moment that you're in. And that's the key thing for me right now.
The thing that I want everybody to hear that Richard is bringing to the table on this is, number one, there are some tools which we will share with you guys kind of toward the end. Richard has shared them with some of us. Mindfulness is what he talked about, being present in the situation. And I think that in terms of self-care, and in some ways, I wish I practiced what I preached. I'm sure we all will say this here. We all struggle with this. Not a single one of us is really great at any of this. We're here to sort of share our own journeys with you about how we've gotten through this moment, and had a little fun with it. What's really interesting is Richard brought this to us a group of us that get together kind of regularly. And one of us, Lanisha DeBartoleben, who's a friend of ours, was so inspired by doing a 2-minute meditation. She continued on with this meditation that YouTube came up, and she solved a major problem at her institution, at least structurally in her mind, at probably the most fraught time she could be leading an institution. So think about that with y'all, is when you can clear your mind of a little bit of clutter, that's a big self-care piece there. So I saw Richard put that link to that 2-minute meditation in the chat box. So we're going to move to Michelle Moon, another good friend in this endeavor. Michelle is the one who created this slide deck and is the magic behind this. Michelle brought a new technique to us actually last week, and we all tried it. And we said, oh, this would be perfect for this piece that the charities asked us to do. So Michelle, you want to go ahead and take it over?
Sure. So I want to share with you all a very simple practice that has really helped me in both personal life and career life, and how those integrate, which is using journaling for self-reflection. I'm sure many of you already have a journaling practice. I'm not sure how many people are in the habit of incorporating that into their working life, though. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how you might approach that as a career practice and as a way to get a little bit more insight and comfort with your own work during this time. So I'm just going to share a few resources with you, and then we can obviously talk more about it in the Q&A. But Yoda, who inspired this presentation, pointed out that already know you that which you need. So journaling is a lot about seeking and finding your answers and your perspective from inside yourself. Bob, who's hosting or moderating our webinar today, and is a great mentor and peer and friend, always reiterates to emerging leaders how critical it is to know yourself. Knowing who you are, what your values are, how you tend to react to situations is an essential quality for a leader to be aware of what they need to be. And we often have trouble accessing our inner voice and our inner sense of direction when we're in the midst of a chaotic time like we're in now, when we're getting conflicting information, we're getting a lot of opinions, maybe people pushing you this way or that way to do what they would like to see. And how important is it right now to access your authentic inner voice? And just a reminder, Yoda, Luke Skywalker met Yoda on Dagobah because he crashed, right? So because he didn't have that self-awareness, bad things happen. So it's a really important practice to be able to connect with your own thoughts and feelings through journaling. There's a lot of science coming out now that really supports the value of journaling, and specifically of writing, and ideally using handwriting to write your thoughts down. You may think you're a very reflective person, and that's one type of reflection that people call reflection in action. And then there's reflection after action. And as we know, those of us, especially in museum education, know that experiential learning has a cycle, and a key component of that cycle is reflection, where we're thinking back on what happened, identifying patterns, understanding cause and effect, seeing what moments were important and highlights, and what things we'd like to do differently. It also helps people access what their own unique perspective is, your authentic views and your voice, giving you that clarity and confidence to then express that when it's time to put your ideas on the table. I also find journaling, especially handwritten with pen and paper, slows down your thinking. I don't know about everyone on the call, but I know there's so much input and so many racing thoughts that can come up in our work. We're surrounded by ideas and people, and it can be very helpful to screen some of that out and think at the pace of your writing hands and the pen in your hand, to get out of that fast-paced reaction and start to really choose your words and the way you want to express them. It really helps organize your thinking. And finally, there's loads of science and a growing body of work showing how helpful it is to journal when you're undergoing stressful experiences. So you may feel unsettled and not really have pinpointed why, but sitting down to journal and realizing, oh, it's because I really need to have a conversation with this one person about this thing that's been bothering me. Or, oh, I didn't recognize what a big problem there is in such and such an area, and I'm going to use this journal as a way to kind of think through how to address that. It helps to take the edge off some of those emotions and get you back in a space where you understand the issue and you can take clearer action. There's lots and lots of ways to journal. There's no wrong way. There are a lot of structured methods, and I have some links here that we can share afterward. I'm a big fan of the bullet journal, which is in the picture. It's kind of a combo to-do list and a way of organizing you can use it to calendar, you can use it to generate ideas, but there are other structures. The Monk Manual is also listed here. That one has a little bit of a spiritual edge, but it's a lot about improving your practice. And then Year Compass is something I do once every year around the new year, which is kind of a look back, look ahead. Those are all free and online. And then there's just open journaling. And I want to invite everybody to just take 1 minute and respond to this prompt right now. Thinking about something that's happened for you within the last 2 months, maybe as part of your working life or your career life, even if you're on furlough now or you've changed your work or you're waiting to get back to work. It's taught us all a lot. So let's put this reflection in action for just 1 minute and jot down the answers to your personal answers to these prompts. I used to think, but now I know. So I'm just going to give you a quiet few seconds. Okay. I cannot see the chat because I'm screen sharing, but I don't know if anyone would like to pop into the chat an example of something that they just wrote, or if any of our co-moderators wouldn't mind sharing a little something.
I'll let you know what comes up in the chat here.
That's great.
Anna wrote in with, I used to think that my passion could motivate anyone, but now I know that people are responsible for themselves and their own actions. Thanks, Anna.
Yes, thank you. That's an awesome example. This is such a great prompt for revealing what you've learned that you may not have articulated, just left leaving it open. So I'll just move to the next slide. If there is another example to share at the end, that would be great. There are a lot of ways to journal, as I mentioned, and you can, if you're the type of person that likes structure, you can borrow some of these and it sort of gets the wheels going so you don't have that intimidation of a blank page staring at you. One of the good things to do is just plan to write fast. Don't think about punctuation, grammar, how nice your handwriting looks. Just get the thoughts out. A lot of journaling is not about the product. It's not like you're going to go back and read it like a novel. It's about doing the thinking and expressing and processing. You can use prompts. I've included a link, and there are lots of prompts online like the one I just gave you that give you a starting point. You can use your journal to collect inspiring quotes, ideas, people you like to talk to. You can ask yourself questions and look over time at how your questions change. I also love the idea of a one-sentence journal. Just the end of every day, write one sentence about that day. And over time, I imagine that would be a pretty interesting record of how your work is evolving. Pick a favorite quote and respond to it. And make lists that are not to-do lists. We all probably have a to-do list, but a list of things you love about your job. A list of the 10 best moments in your career. Things like that really help lift you up and buoy you up even when things are tough. So that gives you a little bit of a look at journaling, and happy to talk about that more as we wrap up.
A note to Michelle, sort of to wrap this up and kicking it on to Trina. One of the things I thought about when Charity asked if I would participate in this is who are the professional, who are the people I want in my world who I feel like do this well. Michelle, you have been one for the entire, 13 years we've known each other. And, I think the idea of forcing yourself to be reflective, not just in your mind, but on paper is a different animal. It's very different for me. I actually don't take a lot of time to do this. And I find every time I do, I benefit exponentially from it. And a side note to those of you who are struggling with big writing projects like theses or dissertations or books or articles, this is exactly, the write fast is exactly the same thing that they teach you to do, is just get everything out on paper, don't worry about it, and sort it out a little bit later. I have found that to be very effective when I'm disciplined to do it. And you guys will hear this, self-care is a discipline every bit as much as a practice. Yes, it's a salve, it helps us, but you just go forward and not do this. I'll tell you, from my own life and experience in working, the one thing I noticed in leaders for so many years was those who weren't self-reflective were the leaders I liked to work with the least. And my colleagues who weren't self-reflective were the ones I liked to work with the least as well. And so these are strategies to sort of understand a little bit about your actions and reactions. Anna, I think you offered us a wonderful example of that. And I'll say, I used to think the days of pandemic were over, but now I know that stupidity can make pandemics come back and spread much more widely than we ever thought. You know, I think most of us thought we were never going to be in a situation like this again. So thank you, Michelle, and thank you for doing your part behind the scenes there. We're going to do questions in a bit, y'all, but feel free to start jotting these things down because we're putting a lot of time for you guys to come back with us on that. So I'm going to kick it over to the woman who long did the last session at the Seminar for Historical Administration, which was mostly about self-care. And we're going to bring in the nonprofit Jedi, or the museum nonprofit Jedi, none other than Miss Trina Nelson-Thomas. Got to unmute yourself, Trina.
Hi, everyone. That was just a practice session to see what was going on. Thanks for that, Bob. I don't really refer to myself as a nonprofit Jedi, but since we were asked to work in this format, I came across something that I felt this really matches up. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to get there. Michelle, could you please go to my next slide? So having no Yoda quotes to refer on, then I was a brat and I have two. So the first one is, you will find only what you bring in. And I should step back and say self-care is something I mostly stink at, so I need to be doing it all the time. And it's very ironic in some ways that I'm participating in this. But one of the big things that this quote reminded me of is you have to feed yourself first. And if you don't, you can't do anything else. And it's very easy to go, oh yeah, blah, 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 but I can just power through, or I can do this, or I can do that, and do the other thing. And I started reading a book that I ordered, of course, like 2 years ago, called The Happy, Healthy Nonprofit. And the whole idea is that treating self-care and well-being is an organizational strategy, but that in order to get there, self-care and well-being has to be an individual strategy. And it refers a lot to people who are more in social service nonprofits than perhaps and social justice kinds of things. And if you think about that, at a certain point, and I think in nonprofits, we're all kind of, have the martyr complex. Oh, I can power through, or, oh, other people need a break, or this, that, and the other thing. And we feel compelled to, like, if I'm not hurting, if I'm not overstressed, if I'm not, just really feeling like I can't, that everything's going in 47 directions, then I'm not doing my job. And quite frankly, that's just crazy pants. I'm sure pants crazy I am. I don't know how that would be in Yoda. Richard, you work on that for me, will you? At any rate, so this whole idea is you cannot feed a healthy organization if you are not healthy coming to it. And so over the years, I've tried to get much better. I used to say when my son, I was raising him at home, that was my most important job, was raising my son. And so that was the standard by which I held up. And that I really still try and follow in terms of my staff, that I have to model the behavior I want to encourage. And so if I'm not taking care of myself, if I'm not feeding myself first and making it okay for my staff to do that, then, it's not going to happen. I can't, just bust my butt, be in there all the time and then say, but it's okay for you. So I think feeding yourself first. And one example of something I use that helped me feed myself first is I have an accountability posse. And I have had an accountability posse in one form or another for a long time. Many years ago, in part, it was to help me get ready for a job search. Last year, I found myself in kind of a really blue place. And And so in this case, the one I refer to the most is it's a group of 10 women that I've known literally my whole life. One of them I met the first day of kindergarten. And, but it's a group of people that are there for me in terms of I can be my authentic self. I can ask for help. They're going to make sure I'm being honest about things. And I think it gets very easy. We think we need, as the leader of an organization or a component of an organization, feel like we have to have all the answers and we need to provide all the structure and we can do all of those things. And it's simply not true. One, and two, you can't do it. So I have a number of these women practice yoga. I don't practice yoga. I do Zumba where I just flail around. Now you know more than you need to know, but it's a nice visual to think about. But this, one of them, they send a lot of quotes related to yoga practice and whatnot. And something that was sent fairly recently is this idea of humbling yourself to ask for help. That it's okay to ask for help. And in reality, it makes you much more approachable. It makes you part of a bigger community because there are people that want to do things to assist you. And if you're just going to be so insulated and Teflon, you don't ask for help, then you're losing that opportunity to give those folks a place to participate in your life and perhaps open up their life. So that's where Feed Yourself First comes from. The second one is, if not mistake you have made, losing you are, a different game you should play. And this is something that I've done for a long time. And I charge my staff with being, you are a leader in the organization, no matter where you are in the organization. And that if you share the coaching, if you share the opportunity to peer teach and peer learn and peer engage and all those kinds of things, then you change the game up, but you also really can make things much more interesting, but also move to places you could not have moved. And so one of the things I've done while we're working remotely is I broke my full-time staff into teams. And when I sent them an email, I just said, go, there's a method to the madness. And I put people together that don't normally work together. And so the first thing I had to do is come up with a hashtag for their team. And I wasn't at all surprised by what they came up. One was hashtag culture over Corona. And that was the more, we'll say, intellectual types. Okay. And then I had one that was made up of collections people and education people. And I wanted them because, you know, sometimes that's a pinch point. And theirs is collect ED, so collected. And then, well, there's always at least one in the group. But there's were three. So some folks, and one of my staff is very dyslexic, so he doesn't write. And so I put him with the collection or the exhibitions person because he designs and writes and does all these things. And then I have another person in there, and they came up with, and I really should have written this down, hashtag. You might want to write this down. It's just too fabulous. In lowercase, STAF, capital F. So you got staff with a capital F at the bottom. And then the word artists, ARTISTS. Yes, I believe they are staff fartists. Yes, yes, yes. But I said they could name themselves whatever they wanted, and they did that. But what I'm having them do is that, you know, for right now, they are coming up with slogans and encouragement for our peers throughout the foundation. So that was the first assignment. You guys have to collaborate and come up with something that will basically say, keep on keeping on to our colleagues. They are working on catchy taglines to let people know that it'll be safe to come back in the museum. You know, we have all staff on deck days where you help with a particular program. It may not be in your bailiwick, but I got to tell you, our curator gets more return on evaluations than anyone I know at a program, right? And you never would have thought it. So it's this idea of not only do I not have to be the brains of the outfit, but, and I'm not, surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me in a lot of different ways, but also encouraging them to team teach and team lead and be part of it is a good way to go. So the last thing I came up with, because apparently I'm speaking Yoda now, is I encourage you all to give yourself some grace. So I believe that's grace myself give. And there's going to be a slide that I encourage you just read. It's about doing a mantra and putting together a mantra for you. This one is adapted from the nonprofit Unicorns mantra. I couldn't work in the unicorn and Yoda thing. I was having no luck with that. So I hope you'll look at this later. But the whole thing is you need to be as kind to yourself as you are to your coworkers, your community members, and the people that you're hanging out with. So excellent. Have an awesome rest of the day after we chit chat.
Thank you, Trina, so much. Trina gets it. The one thing I want to mention, she brought up mistakes, which I think is a good thing. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. But bringing it back to music, which is one of my things. B.B. King said, it's not a true concert unless you have made a mistake at some point during the show. And Miles Davis is very famous for saying it's not the wrong note that you play, it's the note you play afterwards that counts the most. As a musician, or as one who tries hard to be a musician, probably the thing I struggle with the most, when I hit a wrong note, I end up freezing up, and it ruins everything I'm trying to do. And it's a self thing. It's a my thing. So this is the quote that actually kicks this whole thing off. Try not, do or do not. There is no try. This is actually from Empire Strikes Back, probably one of the more famous lines. It's the one Yoda line I actually have memorized. So, like I said, I'm a child of all this, but I didn't obsess over it for years. But I think about this a lot when people say, I'll try. No, you either do it or you don't. There is no try. And I'll give you an example maybe of someone who did it. So can you switch to the next slide, please? So, this guy didn't have apparently the appropriate costume. He showed up at the wrong Civil War reenactment, but he went ahead and grabbed a musket and got on in there and started his game. And that's essentially, or to some extent, what it is that we're talking about as we go through. But let's get to a little bit serious here. Go ahead and flip to the next slide, if you will. So here's where I was. In fact, it was last week. I'm not going to get into a litany of things going on, but I can relate to everything that all of you have gone through, including the fact that I think I brought this whole pandemic on by saying aloud to several people, I think that this 2020 is going to be a big year for the Lyndhurst group, and I'm going to need to do some other stuff and bring in some other help. And of course, now it's my fault that everything came to hell, right? But I was looking at something the other day. This came across my Facebook feed, and I read it. And what's amazing to me is, as I read it, it reminded me of some of the lessons my father taught me growing up about hardship. I didn't even make this connection until just this week. And so I want to sort of share this with you, and I can share this as a link. It's on my Facebook page, but it is something, it's secrets people in recovery being alcoholics and addicts in those recovery systems, 12-step programs usually know that they can help us all discover this. And you can see these. I'm going to read them and describe a little bit. This is something Richard actually did. The fight is fixed. And Richard, in meditating, take a deep breath and accept the reality of COVID-19 before we can navigate it. We're quarantined. We might have lost jobs. We're anxious about our loved ones and our country. We do this not out of defeat, but so we can move forward and find ways to reach out to friends, file for unemployment, challenge those in power to do more. I'm gonna get a little bit spiritual here for just a second, because the term they use is the serenity prayer. But forgetting prayer, if you're not one of those people, it says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I'll tell you, I think about this, I bet weekly, multiple times a week, and I've never been in AA. I don't have alcoholism or addiction. Halt, if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. This is something Richard and Michelle both brought up in terms of stopping and pausing before you do something. The good note I said, checking in with yourself using HALT can be a good preventive medicine. Do you really need to tell that person what you think right now? These tips are the foundation of self-care. For those in recovery, paying attention to HALT can prevent dips in mood that prompt returns to drug use. For those of us weathering a pandemic, they'll help us keep it together so we can be there for our friends and family. The key in self-care, you can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of your needs too. Trina mentions progress, not perfection. People are going to stumble in recovery. Not everybody is going to relapse, but they're going to have emotional outbursts and poor decisions and feel overwhelmed. Does this sound familiar to our situation today? So if we're in a funk from isolation, it's never too late to start. Another one Dad used to teach me, today's the first day of the rest of your life. Even if it just means doing one small thing at a time to improve your well-being, drinking a glass of water, calling a friend. Living with this new normal is a learning process for all of us. Don't hate on yourself for stumbling a little bit or not a lot. I'm going to admit, y'all, I had a tough go of it about week 3 to 5. And I was really frustrated with myself because I couldn't get any traction in anything. And I just have to remember progress, not perfection. This is another one that sounds a little out there. Serenity is not freedom from the storm, but peace amid the storm. Now, anytime you're working on any kind of self-care or progress, you have to learn that there is no kind of, the storm never ends, guys. It just is, it's just a different version of it. So no matter how long this lasts, and life will always have its challenges. Resilience in the face of hardship will serve us in this current situation and beyond. Keep your head where your feet are. Trina, Richard, Michelle, all of them mention this. Those in recovery get caught up in wondering how they'll make it. I'll tell you what my dad said to me one day. Dad got sober when I was probably 5 or 6. My parents actually had gotten divorced, and they got remarried after he got sober. So I was fortunate to be in his live with him. But I said something to him about the one day at a time mantra, which is a big AA thing. You can't live for tomorrow. You got to live for today. Keep your head where your feet are. And he said to me, Bob, there was once a day when the thought of not having a drink the rest of my life scared the shit out of me. And for my father to say that to me, this pillar of manhood, who really was the pillar of manhood in my life, it was really shocking to me that he would be so weak and vulnerable at that thing. So it's easy to worry about the what ifs and how long the situation is. We're healthy and more productive when we bring our minds back to what's happening now instead of trying to predict what lies ahead. This is funny, but I have this underlined. Meditation and other forms of mindfulness can help immensely. There you go. Transforms pain. Trina, Richard, Michelle all brought this up. Serving others is a very important pillar of recovery of any sort, and it transforms painful experiences into meaningful new ones. The pain we're feeling right now is an opportunity to develop our empathy and deepen our empathy. And I'll tell y'all, that is at the core of the museum equation for me. We are teaching, or we are demonstrating empathy for other people and how they live, particularly those of us in history institutions, but what is the experience of other people? We benefit when we reach out to those who are struggling, whether they are experiencing the same problems or facing the same challenges as us. Unsure how to get started right now? Call up someone you know that might be having a hard time and ask them how they're doing. Or frankly, it's even easier to text or send an email. You don't even have to get on the phone. Gratitude, be grateful. Michelle mentions this, and it was something that we talked about when she did a journaling exercise with us too, trying to turn the frown upside down, if you will, and think about it. Gratitude is a great buffer against hardship. It's an open-hearted, feel-good emotion that can supersede fear and prevent catastrophizing. Want to get started? Write a letter to somebody you appreciate. Send it. Try listing out what you're grateful for. The benefits of gratitude accumulate over time. Make it a regular practice. I've written about this in the past, the thank you notes that I've received over the years and the ones that I send. We're not just talking about surviving, y'all, but thriving. And we can switch our mindset a little bit to do that. It's easy to focus on what we can't do. If you're an alcoholic, that means you can't go drink. Or in our situation, you can't go visit friends. I can't travel to see any of y'all or my clients, or missing museum conferences, etc. We have opportunities to strengthen relationships, improve meditation practices, exercise. My 16-year-old daughter finally is on a daily exercise routine for the first time in a long time. And she's like, I feel so good. And we're thinking, yeah, we know, we've been talking to you about this, So focus on big and small things as you go through. AA and any group of people that are working together like we are is mutual aid. It's not self-help. And that's something also that Trina and Richard talked about. There are many paths to recovery, and let's use recovery in the sense of where we are today, our field, our museums, our families, our communities. We all need community. We're all alone together in this. We have to support one another. We've got to stay in contact with friends, loved ones, however we can. Human beings are social. We're going to get through this, and it's with each other. And then finally, AA, if you ever watched Stuart Smalley, the movie from back in the 90s, I think it was Good Enough, I'm Smart Enough, and Doggone It, People Like Me. He was great, Al Franken, because he used all of these little AA quips. One of them is normal is just a setting on the dryer. There is no such thing as normal now. There's no right way to do this pandemic, although we probably should be following the CDC guidelines. I think that's probably the best we got for now. It's this new scenario for all of us. And it's okay to be anxious. It's okay not to be anxious. If you're keeping yourself and others safe and working at any pace toward your well-being, you're doing enough. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember when we're talking about the self-care stuff. Go ahead to the next one, Richard, or Michelle, if you would. I found this actually on Twitter, on Facebook, as I was trying to put some stuff together, and I asked Richard if he would slide this in, pun intended, for us. There's my pun for the day, by the way, Charity. I got some more coming, I'm sure, but we put it here. I think this is actually pretty good. And I'm honestly going to save this as a PDF and print it. And I'm happy to share this with you guys through Charity too, because it really sums up a lot of things that we are talking about today when we're in this situation of self-care. And I don't, Charity, I'm assuming we can share this later, so we don't need to necessarily give everybody time to write it down, or should we? How are we doing?
We'll be following up with all of our session participants this week with materials that were presented or offered up. So this is great.
Okay, so I think we'll open it up for questions now. Go to that last slide. Yep. You guys knew we had to finish with the man. Well, not the man, the puppet, the Muppet, the myth, the legend. Our guiding force today on Dave Brubeck Day, Yoda Day, Star Wars Day. Mic drop.
Dave wasn't available to be here, so we got Yoda instead.
I'm just going to remind everybody, all 12 of our attendees out there, I know we went a little over time with presentations, but I hope that you were enjoying them just as much as I was. A lot of great information. If you have questions, you can post them in the Q&A or in the chat. We'll be watching both, and we'll answer them as they come.
Charity, I wonder also if people in the chat have their own ideas or approaches to suggest as well. It'd be kind of nice to hear from people about what they do to keep in a good space.
Yeah, that's great. I've seen a few comments about the presentation. I do want to say, while we wait for questions to come through, if there are any, I really appreciate that all of you are more willing to be here today. You know, Bob, Michelle, Richard, Trina, you know, we're lucky to have leaders like you in our industry, but also in our communities. I know Avery's on the line and she'll speak here in a few minutes. We appreciate that you were willing to be vulnerable today and share the struggles that you've had and things that you've been thinking about during this time. And I honestly just, you know, giving us a little bit of a peek behind the scenes and how you find creativity and center yourselves. You share a lot of important reminders, especially just about self-care generally, how important it is to self-care in order to be able to care for others. I think that's something that we've hit on a couple times today with all of our Jedi talks. So perfect message. Appreciate it.
If I could answer, and I'm really sorry, I don't know if it's Cayman or Common. My apologies, I'm really good on names. One thing I do know, and this is sort of from understanding the recovery world, I guess, and again, I'm a bystander because of family members, but if people aren't willing to reach back out to you, you can't do anything to make them. And I would say you're going to wear yourself out here trying to do something, and just you're going to have to sort of following, you know, Mother Mary's note to Paul McCartney and his dream, you know, let it be, honestly. That would be my suggestion on your part. You can't make anybody be in touch. Michelle, you were going to say something, I think.
No, not until you're done.
No?
I
Okay.
saw a different question to respond to. Were you all done, Bob?
I'm done, yes.
So I loved that Marina made a comment to the prompt, the journal prompt, about being aware that she's part of a larger museum community. And then she asked, what are some of the museum specific groups, networks, or activities besides this are you active in during this time? I'd love to become a more active member in the field. And I think that's something we could probably all offer some answer to. One thing I'll throw out there that I've really liked lately is that AAM's EdCom, in particular, the Education Committee, they've been hosting what they call Ed Conversations that are really wonderful open space conversations. They start with a focus, they do a little setup, and then they've been doing breakout rooms via Zoom where a group of 10 or 15 or 20 people can exchange ideas. And it's nice because we have a lot of information coming at us through webinars like this, but this is a space to talk and network and get to know one another and really reach out and form new relationships. This time is miserable in a lot of ways, but I've found it very beautiful in the opportunity it's offered to connect with people that I don't normally see and work with. So I would try, if that interests you at all, and you don't have to be an educator, it's just the focus on education, sign up for those. They are free.
I'll say very quickly, two associations have supported us being here today: the Association of Midwest Museums and the Mid-Atlantic Association of Museums. So I would say that's the place I would start. Either your state association, if you're looking for wider networks, that's a great way to sort of ease into the larger work. All of this is ad hoc, frankly. All of what we're doing right now is we just reached out, but we all met through the American Association for State and Local History. That's where we started. But AMM, MAM, and I think I saw Jason Jones on here from WMA. These organizations are set up for communities of practice. That's what they do. I'll make a pitch real quick, Charity. I hope you don't mind, but money. You should be a member of those associations. It's just a part of it's part of the dues of being a part of this field. Is join as many as you can, and the ones you believe in. They offer these things that Charity, Avery, Jason, when I was at ASLH, we think about this stuff because it's our job to. And so right now, I think what we've found, because we've all been doing this for a long time and we've all known each other, we've created little pockets of community outside of that because we were so invested in those organizations for so long. And I'm a big believer in all of them. I don't treat all of them equally in my mind, but you have to find what works for you, and you have to seek it out and find it once you get there to be better at networking and knowing people.
And something, if I can just throw into the mix, is also you may have in your community, you might have other museums in your community, in your county. You might have other people that have the job you have. So educators or registrars or whatnot that are, or take it even a step further. I just try and collect interesting people, not in a creepy way. Let's just get that out there. But Bob, but sorry.
Wait.
Yeah, he used to be cool. I remember when. That's how long we've known each other. Okay, so at any rate, the idea of engaging with some really interesting people, maybe in your community who don't work in the museum field, but you can say, look, can we just have kind of a brain trust, or, just get together. What are you reading? What's going on? So I think it's important to connect with people in the field, but I think it's just as important to connect with other kinds of communities. And I know I get some of my best ideas or prompts. Weirdly, I won't be flying anytime soon, but on airplane magazines, there's always something, so-and-so's going to Sweden, this and that, and then there'll be some little gem in there. So I think it's things from other fields too. And I encourage you, just surround yourself with some creative, interesting people that maybe don't think like you do at all, and be open to the possibilities.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm going to add is, and I was reminded, I'm the chair of the ASLH Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and so we've been kind of starting to have some conversations with AAM and their DNI team as well, and so I think it's really interesting to think about how what your support system is, or who you consider your community. One of the things that I keep telling people is, this is a perfect time to get outside of the museum field and just be a part of the community and connect with other organizations and hey, how you doing? Like that's all of my emails start with the same kind of language. It's, how you doing? I hope you and your network of friends and family are in good health and good spirits. I start off with that before I say anything else, because the thing that I'm most concerned about is you and how you're doing. Um, Museums and Race is a group that I'm really been having some conversations with. Shameless plug. Um, but there's good folks in there, as well as connecting up with some of the folks who've done some mass action. Again, I'm an advocate for thinking about the new normal rather than going back to what was the old normal. And this is a perfect opportunity to kind of mix some stuff up and really get to reset the foundation. One of the biggest questions that I keep getting is, like one of the questions I had recently was, how do I, what can I do to help the community where, so many people don't have don't have technology? There's my on-camera answer, and there's my answer afterwards. And my answer afterwards is, but it's not a whole lot you can do now, except reflect on the moment that this question that you're asking, and consider and ask yourself the same question that I'm asking myself. Why didn't I say something a year ago? Why didn't I say something a year ago? And then also, maybe I should be saying something now, or maybe I should have some focus now, so that as we think about, the 2-year potential of this pandemic, what role does my voice have in connecting with, other organizations and so on and so forth, just so that we aren't always in reaction mode, but we're starting to transition to, being more thoughtful and forward thinking while remembering our present state.
Great advice. I would also recommend that you think about connecting with people the same way you would at a conference. That get 2 people that invite them to bring 2 other people you don't know to a conversation sometime, and be able to spark up a group right now and have a discussion.
Charity, did you say at a conference or just in this situation?
Like what you would do at a conference, but do it virtually. Yeah. You know what I mean? Invite 2 friends to invite 2 friends to a conversation. Sometimes that's a nice way to get with a group and begin to hear some other perspectives.
Quick hint for when you back to the original question, for when you get back to life, the old normal of conferences and stuff. When you're at a conference and you're groups of 2 people and go to them to talk, don't go to one-on-one people. There's a lot less pressure, and the conversation can flow a little bit better. It's one of the tricks. I actually never practiced this trick. I just learned it. I read about it later, and I teach it, and everybody says it works well. So, the key, and this is the thing, as museum people, I mean, we are inherently curious people. That's our work is about curiosity and exploration. And so, if we can practice that intentionally too, I'm finally starting to feel like I'm hitting a groove. I mentioned on Facebook last week, it felt like March was 37 years long. And April, all of a sudden it was May Day. And I was like, what the hell happened to April? And, who knows what it is. And some people said, no, it was the opposite and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, again, there is no roadmap for this, y'all. I mean, we could look back to how we did the pandemic in 1918, or maybe the polio vaccines or something, but there is no roadmap. And of course, society's the ramifications there. So take care of yourself and take that time of yourself to take care of yourself.
I know we're running up against the end of our time here. I do want to give Avery a chance to say hello and thank you. Avery, you still there?
Yeah. Hi, folks. It's weird to be talking, and I don't see myself, but that's okay. I don't want to right now. Thank you all so much for your words of wisdom today. Richard, yours struck a nerve with me because I, too, have done a lot of meditation throughout the years, and I find it to be a very helpful practice. So I think one of my tenets is that self-care isn't an option, it's a priority, and it's something that you have to structure into your day every single day. So I hope that as we go throughout this week, that you can all find a way to practice self-care that works for you. And I think that's the most important thing to remember with this too, is find a way to do self-care that works for you. And that's really all I have to say, except for thank you, and I'm so glad that you could all join us today.
Yes, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who participated today. We were happy to have you. And thanks for your great questions and comments.
I got to give a shout out to my fellow panelists who pulled this together at last minute with me not helping as much as I usually like to. So Michelle, Richard, Trina, thank you. Charity, Avery, thank you for doing this. The response that I saw, even if people didn't come, was, oh, thank God somebody's doing this. And so I can probably speak for these guys and say, or my panelists, is thank you for giving us the platform to talk a little bit about what we're doing and force us to be a little bit more introspective about the way that we do things. So thank you guys both for leading the charge.
Yeah, thank you all. I want to do like round of applause, and also may the 4th be with you all.
Happy Dave Brubeck Day, everybody.
Yes, happy Dave Brubeck Day.
Have a great week, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.